Gender differences and mate preferences. Any discussion of the evolutionary basis of attraction leads to the question, do men and women look for different qualities in a mate? Let's examine the evidence for such gender differences and how they are explained by evolutionary and sociocultural perspectives. Investment in offspring. Evolutionary psychologists claim that evolution gave rise to different preferences in women and men because of the different investments each sex typically makes in offspring. It is incontrovertible that women invest more in offspring than men. For conception, the egg that women provide, one of only 200 to 250 they will produce in their lifetime, contains both genetic material and nutrients the developing embryo needs in the initial stages of life. Men, by contrast, provide sperm, which contributes primarily genetic material and little else, and is something the average man produces on the order of hundreds of millions each day. After conception, of course, in utero development takes place entirely within the woman, taxing her physiologically and preventing her from conceiving another child for at least 9 months. During that time, her male partner is able, biologically, to conceive a large army. It's estimated that 1 in 200 men alive today are descendants of the 12th century Mongol leader Genghis Khan, who conquered 12 million square miles of Asia and Europe and impregnated thousands of women along the way. After the child is born, an extended period of nursing and care further taxes the woman and reduces her fertility, thus further increasing the time until she's capable of producing additional offspring. Given these differences in investments in offspring, women ought to be more selective in their choice of mates, or stated the other way, men would be expected to be more indiscriminate than women. This hypothesis conforms to both the historical record and to everyday observation. In virtually all societies in which this issue has been systematically studied, the average man appears ready to jump into bed much more quickly and with a much wider range of potential partners than the average female. Note that in the world's oldest profession, prostitution, it's nearly always a man making the payment. In keeping with these observations, in a cross-cultural study with over 16,000 participants from societies all over the globe, men and women were asked, ideally, how many different sexual partners would you like to have? Over various time intervals ranging from 1 month to the rest of their lives. For every time interval in all regions of the world, men expressed a desire for a greater number of sexual partners. 2003. Similar trends are observed in studies of the sexual inclinations of gay men, who express a greater interest in having lots more partners than lesbian or heterosexual women do, and less interest in monogamy. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice. What do men want? What do women want? In heterosexual relations, what do men find attractive in a mate? And if women are indeed more discriminating than men, what do women find attractive in a mate? From an evolutionary perspective, if men are to reproduce successfully, they need to find mates who are fertile. But how does one spot a fertile woman? There are no direct cues, but because women experience a relatively narrow window of lifetime fertility, the biological clock, there's at least one reasonably good indirect cue, youth. Men should thus be drawn to younger women, and the cues associated with youth, smooth skin, lustrous hair, full lips, and a figure in which the waist is much narrower than the hips. The key reproductive facts for women are much different. Although the quality of a man's sperm tends to decline a bit in older age, men typically continue to be fertile throughout life, so there is less evolutionary pressure for women to be attracted to youthful men. Instead, given the demands of 9 months of pregnancy and years of breastfeeding, a critical task for women in our ancestral past was to secure a mate who had resources and who could be counted on to invest those resources in their children. According to evolutionary psychologists, then, women should be attracted to men who either possess material resources or the characteristics associated with acquiring them: ambition, industriousness, social status, and physical strength. Doctor, will he ever be able to produce revenue again? This proposed asymmetry in mate selection, men and women seeking each other out and being attracted to one another for different reasons, has been examined systematically in studies of personal ads and online dating sites in the United States, Canada, India, and Brazil, 2009. These studies reveal an overwhelming tendency for men to seek youth and beauty and to offer material resources, and for women to seek resources and accomplishment and to offer youth and beauty. For more extensive evidence, see Feingold, 1990. It's noteworthy that similar patterns are observed in the ads of gay men, who put more emphasis on physical attractiveness as a quality they seek in a potential partner than lesbians do. I love a cute guy walking down the street checking me out. I have blonde shoulder-length hair, a nice tushy, and brown bedroom eyes. I am looking for someone to spoil. To be blunt, I work for an investment firm and I make quite a bit of money. I am looking for a sweet, cute woman to take care of financially. This asymmetry in mate selection also emerged in a survey of over 10,000 participants from 37 different cultures. Respondents were from the West, Germany and the Netherlands, industrialized regions and non-Western countries, Shanghai, China, and Tehran, Iran, and more rural societies, the Gujarati Indians and South African Zulus. Notably, when asked what they look for in a mate, both men and women in all cultures rated kindness and intelligence more highly than either physical attractiveness or earning potential, as do gay men and lesbians. Nevertheless, just as evolutionary psychologists would predict, men in nearly every culture rated physical attractiveness as more desirable in a mate than women did, and in every culture, men preferred marriage partners who were younger than they were. Women consistently preferred partners who were older than they were, and consistently assigned greater importance than men did to various indicators of a potential mate's ability to provide material resources, such as having good financial prospects, social status, and ambition and industriousness. Critiques and extensions of evolutionary theorizing on gender differences in mate preferences. The empirical evidence on human gender differences in mate preferences, like all controversial findings, has been subject to illuminating critiques. In the study examining 37 cultures, participants indicated their hypothetical preferences for what they look like in a mate, but do people actually act on such preferences in real relationships? An evolutionary account would predict that attractive women should marry high-status, wealthy men. Such a result, though, could be explained not by evolution but by other dynamics of attraction we have already considered. For example, perhaps attractive women enjoy elevated status themselves, a benefit of attractiveness, and pair up with more attractive and high-status men, a similarity effect. The challenge for the evolutionary perspective, then, is to show that attractive women pair up with high-status men, independent of such benefits of attractiveness and similarity effects, selecting these men instead because of the material resources they can offer. To test the possibility that such pairings may be due to attractiveness and similarity effects, Elizabeth McClintock gathered ratings of attractiveness and status, socioeconomic standing, from individuals in 500 dating, 500 cohabiting, and 500 married couples, 2014. What she found was that more attractive women and men did indeed personally enjoy greater socioeconomic standing, a benefit of attractiveness, and that attractive and high-status women and men paired off with more attractive and high-status partners, a similarity effect. Importantly, once these benefits of attractiveness and similarity effects were controlled for, there was no evidence for the claim that attractive women pair off with higher-status men for the resources they provide. The mind is not sex-typed, Margaret Mead. A second critique of the evolutionary approach to mate preferences is more theoretical in nature. To what extent is an evolutionary perspective actually supported by the results from the 37 culture study? This isn't an easy question to answer. Though there was consistency among the available data, nearly all the research results can be explained in other ways, without reference to reproductive fitness or any biologically based male-female differences. One influential alternative account, from Alice Eagley and Wendy Wood, maintains that because men have, on average, greater physical size and strength and don't experience the restrictions of pregnancy and nursing, a division of labor has emerged in which men across cultures are usually engaged in work outside the home, and women are the primary caretakers of children. This division of labor has allowed men to have disproportionate control over material resources in virtually all cultures. Thus, being relatively vulnerable economically, women might be more concerned than men are with material needs, and finding mates with resources is one way of meeting those needs, rather than a choice motivated by a need to find a mate who will provide for any offspring, as the evolutionary perspective would have it. If this line of thinking is true, then in societies where the two genders have relatively equal power and control over material resources, there shouldn't be as much emphasis for women on finding a mate with status and economic resources. In a reanalysis of the data from the 37 cultures study, Wood and Eagley found just this pattern. The greater the gender equality in a society, as indicated by United Nations data on income differential, the proportion of women in the national legislature, and so on, the less importance women placed on earning capacity in a potential mate. It should be noted that gender equality didn't affect how much importance men placed on women's attractiveness. However, in more recent similar research, Zentner and Matura, 2012, found that in cultures with greater gender inequality, such as Turkey and Mexico, the usual pattern of men seeking beautiful mates and women seeking mates with resources was more pronounced. But in cultures with greater gender equality, such as the United States, Finland, and Republic of the Philippines, the usual pattern of men seeking beautiful mates and women seeking mates with resources was less pronounced. Further evolutionary insights, physiological influences on mate preferences. In response to the critiques we have just reviewed, evolutionary psychologists have sought to link mate preferences more directly to biologically based processes, examining whether the hypothesized preferences women might express for symmetrical, masculine, high-status, attractive men would be stronger when women are most biologically likely to reproduce, that is, when they are ovulating. In one study, the researchers had women during various phases of their menstrual cycle sniff, no kidding, a number of t-shirts that had earlier been worn by a group of men whose degrees of facial bilateral symmetry varied. As the investigators anticipated, the t-shirts of the facially symmetrical men were judged to have a better aroma than those of less symmetrical men, but only by those women who were close to the ovulation phase of their menstrual cycle, and thus the most biologically prepared for reproduction at that time. It's unlikely that anyone without the help of evolutionary theory would ever have predicted or sought to test such an association. There is evidence that women's preferences may also change in other ways as a function of the phase of their menstrual cycle. For example, it has been argued that the strong jaw of particularly masculine-looking male faces is also a sign of good genes, but women actually tend to rate slightly feminized male faces as most attractive, except when they are ovulating and the chances of conception are highest. Near ovulation, their preferences tend to shift toward more masculinized faces, figure 10.6, where a woman is in her menstrual cycle, also appears to influence the behavior of the men around her. In one study, men were asked to smell the t-shirts worn by women at different points in their cycles. Those exposed to the scent of a woman near ovulation had higher levels of testosterone, a hormone known to lead to status-enhancing behavior that might be more likely to attract women than those exposed to a woman's scent at other phases of her cycle. Studies like these, which assess changes in judgments of attractiveness across biologically meaningful conditions, provide the strongest evidence to date that the evolutionary approach to human attraction has merit. For a critique, see Wood et al. 2014. These studies take us far beyond simple empirical demonstrations of male and female differences that most people have already observed in their daily lives, and speak to the insights yielded by an evolutionary perspective and the controversies it has generated. Figure 10.6, Male attractiveness to women during the menstrual cycle. In this study, women selected the one phase they thought was most attractive from photos varying from 50% masculinized to 50% feminized. The graph shows that the women tended to select somewhat feminized faces overall, but the mean degree of feminization of the selected faces was less for women who were at a stage in their cycle when the chance of pregnancy was high. Okay, so you can see the graph. It's a bar graph. On the x-axis, you have non-ovulatory phase, low conception risk, and you can see they prefer like an 18 mean feminization phase. And then the second bar shows the ovulatory phase, high conception risk. And you can see they prefer 8 feminized phase. That's a big difference. Women generally find slightly feminized male faces more attractive, larger eyes, weaker chin. During ovulation, when conception risk is highest, this preference declines. Looking back, proximity causes people to have direct encounters, and mere exposure leads to liking. People are more inclined to be attracted to those who are similar to themselves because they validate one's beliefs and values. Physically attractive individuals are more popular with members of the opposite sex, are evaluated more positively, and tend to have better social skills. Certain elements of physical attractiveness may indicate reproductive fitness, the individual's ability to reproduce. Interesting evidence and debate has emerged surrounding the contentions that there are gender differences in mate preferences, namely that women may prefer high-status men who can provide ample resources to a relationship, and that men express a stronger preference for physical attractiveness and youth. Romantic relationships. Throughout history and across many different cultures, the reasons for marrying have varied dramatically. In hunter-gatherer societies, parents married their children off to members of neighboring tribes. This practice had the effect, whether intended or not, of ensuring more cooperative trading relationships between groups. It also reduced the likelihood of genetic problems that can stem from inbreeding within one's own tribe. For much of Western European history as well, marriages were arranged by parents to consolidate ties with other families, thereby ensuring that property and wealth stayed within the families. In some cultures today, arranged marriages are still common, but for most of the roughly 2.3 million couples who get married each year in the United States, the vast majority of all North Americans marry. Marriage is about romance and love. So what is this thing we call love? How does love change over the course of a long-term relationship? And what determines which way a relationship will go, toward contentedness and happiness, or toward dissatisfaction and breakup? What is love? Ask some friends this question, and you'll probably get as many different answers as the number of people you ask. Sure, there'll be some overlapping sentiments in the responses, but there'll be a lot less overlap than you'd have thought. When researchers Beverly Fair and James Russell asked undergraduates to list as many different types of love as they could, the students came up with 216 different kinds, and almost half of these were mentioned by more than one person. Marriage across cultures. Wedding ceremonies vary in their specific styles and formats according to cultural practices, but they are held throughout the world. Here are ceremonies in A, South India, B, Scotland, and C, Jilin, China. Most social psychology studies account for multiple varieties of love, but researchers typically organize them into 3 broad categories: companionate love, compassionate love, and romantic love. Companionate love is the love we typically experience with friends and family members, people we generally trust, share activities and interests with, and like to be around. Compassionate love is akin to a communal relationship with bonds that focus on monitoring and responding to another person's needs, such as how a mother looks out for her child's well-being, or how a spouse might put his partner's needs above his own. But it's romantic love we're referring to when we say we're in love with someone. This is a love that we're moved by in poetry and epic romance novels, that we laugh about in romantic comedies, that we search for on dating websites. Romantic love is the love associated with intense emotion and sexual desire, which is why it's sometimes referred to as passionate love. What do we know about this kind of love? One prominent feature of romantic love is its time course. Early in romantic love relationships, partners experience powerful, at times all-consuming, feelings of passion or sexual arousal for each other. The intensity of romantic passion is expressed in a host of metaphors that capture its single-mindedness and loss of control. Lovers feel knocked off their feet, hungry for each other, and mad or crazy with desire. These feelings of passion are registered in specific patterns of touching, cuddling, and sexual behavior and fluctuate for women, with rising levels of certain sex hormones, especially estrogen. See box 10.7 on page 354 for more on biological bases of love. It's important to note that people feel this early passion uniquely for one preferred romantic partner. Eli Finkel and Paul Eastwick pioneered the speed dating approach to the study of early desire, 2008. In their research, a dozen or so young heterosexual women and a dozen or so young heterosexual men arrived at the lab and engaged in a series of rapid-fire, 2-minute get-acquainted conversations with all the members of the opposite sex. After each interaction, the participants rated their sexual desire and feelings of chemistry for each other. The researchers found that when one person felt unique desire and chemistry for another, those feelings were often reciprocated. Speed daters who felt chemistry for many other people actually generated little desire or chemistry in others. Apparently, people can detect whether another's interest in them is targeted or promiscuous. Surveys indicate that when two people spend increasing amounts of time together, early passion ebbs and a second element of the romantic relationship becomes more prominent, a deep sense of intimacy. Couples feel increased comfort and security from the sense of being close to and knowing each other better. With increasing intimacy, romantic partners include their partner's perspectives, experiences, and characteristics more and more into their own self-concept. In one study of this second phase, married couples first rated 90 trait adjectives for how accurately they described themselves and their spouse. After a brief distractor task, participants viewed each trait on a computer screen and indicated as quickly as possible whether the trait was like me or not like me. As you can see in Figure 10.7, participants were faster to identify traits on which they were similar to their spouse and slower to ascribe traits to themselves that their partners didn't also possess. With increasing intimacy, it's almost as if the two partners become one. An investment model of commitment. Of course, we've all known people, maybe even ourselves, who seem unable to commit to romantic relationships. One approach to understanding why some romantic partners remain committed in their relationships while others don't is provided by Carol Rusbolt's investment model of commitment. According to this model, influenced by social exchange theory described earlier, once partners have a romantic bond, 3 determinants make them more committed to each other: satisfaction, the relative absence or poor quality of alternative partners, and investments in the relationship. Figure 10.7, construing close others as we construe ourselves. When we fall in love, does our identity merge with that of our partner? In exploring this question, the researchers in this study had romantic partners label traits as true or not true of the self. Some traits were also true of the partner, others weren't. Okay, so you can see there are 2 side-by-side bar graphs. The 2 sets of side-by-side bar graphs. On the left, you have true of partner. Romantic partners are faster to label traits as true of themselves when the traits are true of their partner as well. Yeah, you can see they're responding faster when their trait is also true of their partner, almost twice as fast. And when it's not true of the partner, they're responding almost as slowly as if it's not true of themselves. Investment model of commitment. A model of interpersonal relationships maintaining that 3 determinants make partners more committed to each other: relationship satisfaction, few alternative partners, and investments in the relationship. The first and perhaps most obvious determinant of enduring commitment is satisfaction, based on the partner's evaluation of the rewards and costs associated with their relationship. One of the strongest indicators of romantic satisfaction in long-term relationships is how much partners feel they get out of the relationship. Interestingly, recent work suggests that people base their commitment to a relationship more on their expected future satisfaction in the relationship than their current satisfaction. In other words, people have beliefs, accurate or not, about how satisfied they are likely to be in their relationship down the road, and these beliefs impact their current relationship commitment. But neither current satisfaction in a relationship nor beliefs about future satisfaction in it tell the whole commitment story. Whether or not alternative partners are available is another strong contributor to the enduring commitment a partner feels. The fewer options a romantic partner has outside the relationship, the more committed that partner tends to feel, and the more likely that partner is to remain in the relationship. For example, in questionnaire studies, romantic partners who report few potential alternative partners are less likely to break up later. The third determinant of commitment is the magnitude of the investments the couple puts into the relationship. People are more likely to remain in a relationship if they have invested heavily in it. Investments can include the time, effort, caring, and love expended, as well as the shared memories, mutual friends, and shared possessions that are part of having a life together. Just as it's hard to walk away from a business venture into which one has invested substantial time and money, it's difficult to end a relationship into which one has poured a lot of time and energy. Indeed, for committed romantic partners, the self is literally invested in the relationship, in the sense that both people come to mentally view themselves as a single unit with their partners, using the plural pronoun we to refer to themselves. Recent findings suggest that one person's investment in a relationship not only increases that person's own commitment to the relationship, but also increases the partner's investment in the relationship. In one experiment, one group of participants listed various ways their romantic partners invested in their relationship, including a specific example that was particularly meaningful and important. Participants in this group subsequently reported greater commitment to their relationships relative to control participants, who either listed only the investments they themselves made or didn't list any at all. Participants in the first group also reported more gratitude. It was this gratitude that accounted for their own subsequent higher commitment to the relationship after thinking about their partner's investments. The investment model of commitment. This model maintains that commitment to a relationship depends on satisfaction with the relationship, the presence and quality of alternatives to the relationship, and investments in the relationship. In empirical tests of Rosebald's investment model, participants indicated every 6 months or so their level of agreement with statements tapping commitment, as well as ones capturing the three determinants of commitment: satisfaction, alternative partners, and investments. Examples of these statements are shown in Table 10.1. The level of partner agreement for each of the three determinants of commitment early on predicted whether a couple stayed together or broke up down the road. Table 10.1. Measuring the commitment determinants in romantic relationships. Determinant: satisfaction. Sample item: our relationship does a good job of fulfilling my needs for intimacy. Determinant: alternative partners. Sample item: people other than my partner are appealing. Determinant: investments. I feel very involved in our relationship, like I've put a great deal into it. Determinant: commitment level. Sample item: I am committed to maintaining my relationship with my partner. How exactly, then, does commitment promote relationship longevity? Is it enough to simply be committed? If only it were that easy. Rather, research shows that commitment is linked to longer-lasting relationships because it encourages behaviors that are good for the relationship, such as sacrifice and forgiveness. To illustrate, Finkel and his colleagues have shown that higher commitment is associated with forgiving a romantic partner's mistakes. Other researchers have found that commitment is also linked to greater self-sacrifice in couples, as when one partner agrees to move to an undesirable city for the sake of the other partner's job, or when one partner gives up meat because it offends a vegan spouse. Relationship dissatisfaction. It's widely known that roughly half of first marriages in the United States end in separation or divorce. Less widely known is the finding that marriages are less satisfying today than they were 30 years ago. Marital conflict stimulates adrenal and pituitary stress responses, which are known to cause cardiac problems and inhibit immune system protections. In addition, unhappy marriages can leave a disturbing legacy. Children of divorced parents experience more personal, academic, and romantic difficulties, both during childhood and later in adulthood. Given that romantic dissatisfaction is so widespread and has such far-reaching effects, learning about what predicts romantic dissatisfaction and divorce is important. I hope when I grow up I'll have an amicable divorce.